So you want to align your rear derailleur hanger so that you have perfect gears? Well, that's good. Here's a tool to do it. It's a Park DAG 2.2. It's nice and shiny, used by a lot of bike shops. It's also $108 Australian plus postage, whatever that is in your currency. If you can afford one, well and good. If you can't, how would you like to make a homemade one? Really cheap. Well, here you go. You can do it. You can make one. Let's go and find out how to make it and if it is as accurate as a park tool. First up, you'll need a length of 2 cm steel square tubing. The largest diameter wheels it'll be measuring is for road bike 700C and mountain bike 29er. A good size I found was 24 centimeters. So go ahead, measure, mark and cut at 24 centimeters. Cut straight through at the mark. I bought this piece from the hardware store. Quite often you'll find they've got bits lying around, so you might even score yourself a length for nothing. Deburr both ends of the rod with a metal file. So go down to your local bike shop and buy a rear quick release axle like that, 6-7 speed, whatever. It's got a few bits and pieces on there. So that's the sort where a skewer goes through, the hollow sort, quick release. You don't need this, you just need that. We're going to drill a hole so the axle fits through. At 1.5 centimeters in from the edge and in the middle of one of the sides, drill a pilot hole. With the drill bit in the same hole and the drill as close as 90-degree right angle to the rod as possible, drill through the opposite side as well. Now you have a small pilot hole exactly in the centre of 2 opposing faces. Now get a slightly larger drill bit and enlarge both holes. And now a third drill bit, even larger again. And now an even larger final drill bit. The axle almost fits through. This time we're going to use a reamer because we don't want to make the hole too big. Try and make both holes the same size so the axle fits through snug. Finally, the axle fits through about perfect. Now take a small round file and take the burrs off the inside on both sides of the tube. So now here's our quick release axle we're going to use, and 5 lock nuts, one 5mm spacer washer which fits quite snugly on the axle as well, and 2 ordinary flat washers. Screw one of the lock nuts on all the way to the end of the thread. One of the washers on. Put the axle through the hole of the tube, and then another washer on, and then another lock nut. The spacer washer, and then finally the other lock nut. Here I'm using a 17mm cone spanner, but you can use probably 2 ordinary spanners, and lock the nuts on this side against each other nice and tight. Now we're tightening the inner lock nut against the end of the thread on the axle. Here we can see we've gone too fast, too tight. So we need to loosen off some of the lock nuts. Try and get it like an axle and a hub, so that the axle rotates freely, and yet there's very little play between the axle and the rod. Screw another lock nut on, about 3.5 centimeters along. Now for the knob handle, you can actually use a common garden fitting like this. But we're going to use one of these. It's a common 13mm garden connection with a 25mm thread. And there's a 25mm cap that fits nicely on. Here's a closer look. Now cut the 13mm extension flush to the body of the plug, and we're also going to cut some of the thread so that the cap fits tightly onto the plug. Now find a large nut that fits tightly into the plug, but not too large so that it warps the thread. Tap it in as far as it goes with a hammer. Now with that lock nut wound back on the thread about 3.5 centimeters, put the plug on with the thread facing outwards. Now thread another lock nut on as far as you can with your fingers. Now use a deep socket to screw it on all the way. Here I'm using a lawnmower spark plug socket. And tighten it firmly against the lock nut. And now screw the cap onto the plug nice and firmly by hand. Don't use any spanners or anything because that'll only damage it. It's only plastic. I'm just using a rag here because it hurts my hand for the final tighten. All done. Nice and neat. Turns freely. Yeah, there's a little bit of slack there, but that's fine. Now we're going to measure off a piece of 25mm or 1-inch black poly at 22 centimeters. And then cut it. As you can see, our piece of poly is bent. This is because poly comes in big round coils of 50 to 100 meters. So this has got a slight bend to it. So to straighten it, put it on the rod part of the tool we've already made and gently heat it with a heat gun or a hairdryer. Once it's cooled down, there you go, nice and straight. And now on one end of your black poly, come in about 1 centimetre and drill an 8mm hole straight through, all the way on both sides. Now get a piece of riser tube, which is used for irrigation in gardening, and cut it at 13 centimetres. Now get a soft plastic washer. Here I'm taking one off of a roofing tech screw. And just run that 8mm drill through the washer. Now put it on your riser tube, and it's got to be a fairly, here comes that word again, snug fit. So it's not too tight, but you can still move it up and down the tube. Now screw a threaded barb into the end of your riser. Now take a Presta valve cap, you should have a few of them lying around, and super glue it to the end of the threaded barb. This is a plastic cap for a chair leg, and it fits nicely into the end of the poly and makes it look nice. It also makes the end where the riser tube's going to go through a little bit stronger. And because the cap's blocking the holes we've already drilled for the riser tube, run the drill through again. Now thread the riser tube through the black poly tube we've just drilled. As you can see, I've used a red valve cap because it's going to be used as a pointer or indicator, and it's easier to see than a black cap. You don't have to do this. I'm just adding an extra little knob for my fingers to be able to grab the indicator end. It's actually one of 4 little feet from a radio I was throwing out anyhow. And put a plastic cap on the hanger end of the tool. There we go, all nice and done. Now put it together, and what have you got? A rear derailleur hanger adjustment tool. So there you go, hopefully that video was understandable and you can make your own rear derailleur hanger adjuster. One thing to keep in mind, the angle here needs to be as close as possible to 90 degrees. If you have access to a drill press, that'll be really good. That'll make it accurate and a more accurate measurement. I did mine by hand, it seemed to work quite well. It looks a lot shorter than the Park tool, but that's because it's actually extendable. So it does measure wheels small and large. In fact, it goes longer than the Park tool. So no problem in measuring smaller wheels. You can probably even measure 24-inch and BMX size wheels if you want to make your own size adjustments, right up to 29ers. So no problem there. If you have any ideas of improving the tool, great, let us know in the comments below and we can all benefit from that. In the meantime, to see how accuracy it compares to the Park tool, I'll post another video and you can watch that and see how accurate this tool really comes out at. In the meantime, happy rear derailleur hanger adjusting.